Lawyers of Reddit, what is the most morally challenging case that you have worked on? Did a bail hearing back in my second year of practice as duty counsel. Think public defender type role. The guy had trapped his girlfriend in the cab of his pickup. Twisted one arm up behind her back to her shoulder and broke it. Then did the other side. I had to run the bail hearing for him. While she and her family were sitting in the front row of the court. She had both arms in casts and in slings. Thankfully, his surety, the person posting his bail, melted down on the stand, and we had to adjourn. By the time he was up for bail again, had retained private counsel, who put the same surety up on the stand, even after I warned him not to, in front of the same justice. Upside, he got detained. Not me, but my brother is a criminal defense attorney. He worked as a contracted public defender for a few years after starting his own business to get some guaranteed income while building his client base. The catch with these contracts is you're not able to refuse clients. He had to defend a guy that had repeatedly raped his toddler daughter while the mom watched. When I asked him about how he got through it, he said, "When I get to a point where the crime is so heinous that I can't empathize with my client, I switch my frame of thought from how will I get this guy reduced or no time, to how can I ensure this guy won't have a chance at a mistrial." So essentially, he copes by making sure that everyone from the police, to the jailers, to the prosecution team are 100% on the up and up, so that when this guy gets found to be guilty, there's no way he'll get set free on a technicality. During my days of insurance defense, I spent one lovely afternoon bickering with counsel for a co-defendant over who would be responsible for paying the $5,000 that was keeping us from settling. We did this while on site at the plaintiff's home for a deposition. Plaintiff was hit by a semi-truck, i.e. the truck hit his actual body on the interstate, and while it managed not to kill him, it tore off an arm and a leg, and shattered most of everything else. He was almost entirely immobile, confined to a power chair that he could barely operate, and confided to us that, if he had function in his remaining hand, he'd shoot himself. Oh, the $5,000? It was based on an estimate to renovate his bathroom so that he could actually use it. Had been pissing and shooting in a bedpan in the living room. I felt like a complete frick sitting in front of him and arguing about such an insignificant sum. Family law attorney here. I've done plenty of divorces and custody dispute cases. That most stuff doesn't get to me. It's only when the kids are put in a bad situations between one or both of the parents being some type of addicts that really gets to me. One that was especially hard for me was a divorce where I represented dad. Mom was a raging alcoholic that would bring random guys home many nights from the bar while the dad was working. I saw video and heard phone calls from their little boy calling the dad at work at like 2 AM because he was tired but couldn't go to sleep because mom was playing loud music and had friends over still partying. I was on the right side of that one, but seeing and hearing that stuff with the little boy really got to me. Not my case, but at a previous firm, a partner sent out a firm-wide email congratulating his team on a great win. It detailed how their win meant that our client, giant fossil fuel company, wasn't liable for damage to the environment caused by leaks in their pipes. Instead, the taxpayers would be covering the cost. The partner went on to say something to the effect of this saves our client $X billion a year in environmental cleanup and pipe maintenance. For some reason, even though it wasn't my case, that one has always stuck with me. Please don't ask for specifics. Had a case where a guy shot and killed a security guard that slapped him across the face for selling drugs near a store. I knew the guy had done it. It was close to midnight. The crime scene had poor lighting, and the shooter wore a hoodie. Only eyewitness that showed up for the trial had told the police at the time of the crime that the suspect was black. The defendant wasn't Caucasian, but wasn't black either. That, was the argument that won the jury over. Defendant found not guilty. He thanks me while in tears. His mother and grandmother bring me cake and a thank you note afterwards. Less than a year later, I'm watching the news, and they're reporting a crime where a crew held up 3 families hostage while robbing their apartments. They beat up the janitor very bad. They tied the families up and locked them in one of the apartment's bathroom while threatening to throw a grenade inside if any of them decided to wizen up. For a brief second one of the robbers looks right into an elevator camera before spray painting it close up on the guy's face. I think you can imagine whose face I was looking at. Edit. To everyone asking, he was identified but never caught. Managed to stay on the run for maybe a year and a half and was later killed over some drug related debt. Lawyer here. I once had to defend a guy that killed his own grandmother and rubbed his own fecal matter all over the corpse. It was bad. I represented a mom in a custody case. Both parents fighting for primary. Mom was admittedly a mess and suffering from some mental health issues. Dad took the kid and didn't bring them back for a few months in violation of the order. I got the kid back. Then met with mom and kid and realized kid was doing way better with dad and should be with him. Tried to reason with mom. She didn't list. Ultimately the child protection office got involved and child was placed with dad. I last saw mom many years ago and she was still not in a super healthy place and child was still with dad. So best ending happened and not because of me. Edit. Words to make things more clear. My friend's dad is an attorney. He started out in criminal defense and lucked out on one of his first cases. A friend he'd known for years' wife was horribly murdered while he was away, dismembered with an axe. Her body had been found by a fluke, and there was a tiny bit of circumstantial evidence pointing to the husband. He was an upstanding citizen. The two had never fought. It was a silly case. The lawyer got the husband acquitted, and while they were having celebratory drinks, the husband admitted he'd actually done it. My friend's dad walked out of the bar and switched to corporate law. Not me but a friend who studied law. They helped on a case where the father had shot and killed the mother of his children. The reason why he had shot her was because he was working abroad to earn as much money as he possibly could for his kids so that they would never have the life he did as a child. He came back to find that she'd spent all the money on drugs and his kids were being abused. Edit. I'm such an Reddit. I didn't realize you could edit comments to all those asking he was on death row. When my friend got the case, they were part of the team trying to overturn his death penalty. I don't know if they succeeded. This is my first case and am currently working on it now, but it feels largely morally reprehensible and to trust case where our client has been indeed manipulating the market in shoddy ways. However, I'm not defending the client's practices, I'm merely advising him, which means I tell him in pages of legalese to cut the bullshit, because that shoot will land you big ass fines. Not a specific case, but viewing child pornography was pretty uncomfortable. As a defense attorney, you would go to the prosecutor's office to view the discovery files as they are prohibited from releasing it outside the office. So you go in and sit down in a small room and a legal secretary brings you the discs with the files on them. On one case, I had to view the files more than once. So imaging rolling in saying, "Hey, need to see that kid's dick again. Thanks." Also representing parents in juvenile, where I was fighting to return kids to pretty broken homes. Most of the time it didn't bother me, but in one case I represented a dad whose baby mama had just had these adorable twins. These parents were absolute shootheads. Now a lot of times, the foster families are one small step above the parents themselves, not people I would ever hire to babysit my kids. But in this case, the foster parents were a couple of 30-somethings who I presume couldn't have kids of their own. They would show up to court with the infant twins, and they bought them new dress clothes for each court date. So cute. They wanted to adopt the kids, should the parental rights of the BO parents be terminated, so I felt pretty bad showing up trying to get the kids returned to the dad. I left that job before that case was completed, but I assume it had a happy ending. The judge was never going to return the kids to the parents, so I like to think the couple has them now. I've only worked as a legal intern, not a lawyer, and I cannot speak in specifics for obvious reasons, but I've dealt with about 8 child sexual assault cases at this point. I helped prosecute most of those, but played a role in the defense on a couple. I can tell you, either which way you're working the case, it's tough. Nothing is more terrifying than reading a young victim's description of being abused at the hands of a trusted family member. Legal, smart, and moral are very different terms which don't necessarily go together in legal work. Actions can definitely be all three. I think the toughest decisions are moral, legal, but not "smart." The most morally challenging case is the one where a client has been wronged, but circumstances make holding someone to account too difficult or expensive to be accomplished. Telling a client you have been hurt by someone who did something illegal, but you can't do anything about it. Sorry really sucks. Disclaimer, none of the below is legal advice. Don't take legal advice from randos on the interwebs. Bringing a medical malpractice action can be really expensive. Some states require you hire a medical expert to present certain evidence. Some states cap the amount of damages you can recover. I've seen some egregious behavior shrugged off because the probably at fault party knows that most people can't afford to bring the case. Every case is a big deal to individual clients. Losing or getting a bad outcome is never fun. But telling a client that someone is going to skate because it's too expensive feels morally worse. Well, fresh after law school, I worked on a case where the people involved were sketchy in every possible way. My role was very limited. I was just helping with some securities filings. The problem was that nothing quite added up, and when I brought the discrepancies over to my boss, she just told me to put the information in anyway. She was very friendly with the client. We saw him at our office all the goddamn time, as head often just dropped by to chat and hang. Years later, the company folded in a manner of speaking, and their clients, many of whom were quite vulnerable, lost hundreds of millions of dollars. I was not at all surprised. My boss was someone whom I had dreamed of reporting for years for that and other sketchiness, but she was slippery enough never to do anything wrong that didn't carry some level of plausible deniability. Additionally, it always felt like I had zero idea of what I was doing as a student and then first year associate there. Further still, I felt powerless against someone who had built herself quite a reputation within the legal community here and who had been known to act vindictively toward anyone who crossed her in the past. In any case, I do think about that old file oft. It's not the only one we worked on at that old firm that eventually blew up in a bad way. It's also really not great to feel like you may have helped legitimize an entirely into me, obviously fraudulent operation. My experience there definitely jaded me quite a bit, even compared to other junior lawyers. I don't typically do family law, but I have a case where we suspected the mother had Munchausen by proxy, which if you've seen the Hulu movie Gypsy you know how messed up it is. The child was always fine with the dad, but mom would take the child to the doctor every other day. When they didn't give the answer mom wanted, she'd get a second, third etc opinion. Mom was oddly close to the nurses and doctors. Child had some type of cancer where child needed a colostomy bag and mom didn't clean it. It was infected so bad that child can't wear it anymore and child is getting more sick and dying. Mom allegedly pushed her child in the shower and it messed up their head. It's possible mom is feeding her drugs too because child puked blood from time to time. Now the child has seizures once a week from the shower incident. Mom spent $400,000 on medical bills in 1 year. Mom made a fraudulent GoFundMe and only used $200 of the thousands received on medical bills. The page has since been removed, and the case is still open until we can find more experts to testify. I worked for a multinational crypto Ponzi scheme. My bosses were too dumb to understand the product, which clearly seemed pointless. Client flew us business class to several conventions to parade us the lawyers in front of prospective customers. My bosses ignored my repeated exhortations to drop them, but decided to be a little cautious and not publicize our arrangement with a client. Soon the scam unraveled, and we started getting calls from scammed customers saying that we heard from such and such, that we are the lawyer, where the frick is our money. It was finally then that my bosses decided to drop them. MLMs are considered pyramid schemes in my country and both are banned in order to protect consumers. It's a crime to establish an MLM. Public prosecution here got wind of an MLM operating and shut it down, closing up the premises and everything. My firm was hired by the MLM to defend their case and establish to the public prosecution that they should be able to continue to operate. I had to prep all the defenses while absolutely despising MLMs and thinking that they're run and operated by predatory pieces of shit. We had several high-up employees from the MLM's head office in the US fly halfway across the world to us multiple times for status update meetings lasting 15 to 30 minutes or so. That could have literally been done over email or conference call. Nope, they just had so much money to burn off the backs of vulnerable people who have zero chance of succeeding in their business that a gang of them would fly over every so often to ask, so how's it going? I thanked my lucky stars every time the public prosecution rejected one of our arguments, and eventually the MLM gave up and cleared out of the country. Never been so happy that my arguments were unsuccessful. Way late, but I knew someone who worked on a morally disappointing case. Basically, a woman was sexually assaulted. It was obvious the guy did it. The woman was clearly distraught and the guy just acted guilty. My friend said from the bottom of his heart he could just tell, like the rest of the jury. But the case was years old, on top of her waiting to press charges. In the end the grand jury couldn't send it to court. Simply not enough evidence, it was all hearsay. The way my friend told it, the jury was extremely distraught, lost trust in the system and the likes. They just felt so disgusted, like they should send this guy to court, and they had the power to do so, but they just couldn't. A close relative was a judge in a pretty small town in the 80s. There was a case, drug deal gone bad. I guess one guy went to his dealer's trailer. Guy planned to rob dealer, not only take his drugs, but his money as well. Dealer picked up on that plan quickly and pulled out a gun. First guy pulled out his gun as well. Both died. Suicide by stupidity. Really? The families ended up suing each other for wrongful death. $RELATIVE spent a couple of days going over the law before they arrived in court, each wanting to get rid of the other for money. Relative, while on the bench no less, said something to the effect of they both did society a favor by removing themselves from our society. Early 80s, not a chance for that statement to go viral the way it would now, but you can bet the week following the letters to the editor in the local paper Blue UP only include this because the prosecutor was laughing so hard he had to excuse himself from the room when the judge made the comment. Not a lawyer, but a lawyer's assistant. My boss asked me to falsify the signature of a recently dead man in order to have a will validated. In my country, when a person dies, it takes up to 4 days to have the act registered, and in that time frame my boss legalized a secret will in which one of the sons of the deceased would be substantially benefited. It was of course her client. I was born and raised Catholic, married into a very prominent Catholic family. I joined a firm that was representing sexual abuse victims. I initially stayed out because the bishop who was in charge of the bad priest married my wife and me, but the more I observed the case and his lying, I couldn't sit by. When the case was dismissed at the trial level, the partner asked me to write the appellate briefs because that was my forte. I did, and the dismissal was reversed and the church quickly settled. Highlight of my career and spiritual life. In some areas of law, you get a bit of everything. I'm in one of those areas. I do not do family law, but I had one case where an ex-husband and ex-wife were against each other. Both were completely fraudulent. Both were trying to use their young daughter against the other. One was a chronic cheater/opportunist and the other was constantly high or drunk and constantly trying to access his former wife's financials. She was quite well off when they got together. This was not a divorce case, but due to the nature of the case, all attorneys involved were privy to the entire record of their divorce. I feel like our client edged out our opposition very minutely in being a slightly better person, but it was a hollow victory. I defended a man accused of abusing his GF, and it was the third time he'd been charged in the same relationship. It was obvious he was guilty, but the GF essentially was under his spell and stopped cooperating. Obvious pattern of some pretty serious abuse.